Damian,
And we're live. Welcome to the Killer Be Killed podcast, the most unlistened to podcast on the interwebs. And yeah, with George and Josh. And today we're going to be talking about a little bit what's going on in Mexico, get into some of like the nitty gritty as far as even some of the tactical stuff. If you are down there and forced to shelter in place. It's been a little crazy. So for some background, well, before we get into that, what the hell were we just talking about before we got on?
Instructor mentorship and how George never responded to me, and I was going to come.
Oh, tell me I didn't respond to you.
That's right.
How many have been going out there you haven't responded to, dude? And it's funny because I just sent out the shirts and everything too, right? So I'm like, right. You guys got a code coming and whatever at some point.
So I told you beginning of the month. Beginning of the month.
Did you?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Josh, he doesn't even read his messages.
Josh, beginning of the month. I got your back, brother.
He's like all the instructors send me all your stuff, blah, 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 blah. And so I sent him like, this is my goals, George. Ghosted. And then it's like, get your shirts. And I'm like, hey, George, I also still haven't gotten a shirt yet. Ha ha ha. Ghosted.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love you.
Yeah. So hey, Josh, have you been getting a lot of emails now?
No.
Okay,
I'm
good. We fixed
right
it.
Out. Like everything that I feel like I should be getting, I'm getting.
Awesome. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
There's some settings on there, and I apologize, everybody. Setting up our email system, it was not doing. We had some settings, we had some buttons clicked, or we were sending out a lot of emails. Like way too many and multiple times, and it was nuts. So we seem to have that issue fixed. We're at a good rhythm. We also cleaned up the list a lot for people who were not responding or on there forever. So if you're not getting any emails, you best go fill out a form or go buy something, because if you're not getting emails, you're not. That's it. I mean, I get it that if you're, if it's run its course, that's.
Wait, did you ever watch Shark Tank? I'm thinking about listen to what you're saying right now. Did you ever watch Shark Tank with Kevin O'Leary, and he'd be like, "You're dead to us. You're dead to me." Like that's what I'm thinking right now.
Well, I mean, it's not. It's like, look, if you're not opening it, you don't want to hear what you're done with us. So no problem. We're not going to bother you. That's why some of these people that come back after 10, 15 years are like, where's my account? I'm like, because they saw an ad, they clicked on it, and they're like, oh yeah, I thought I bought something here, back, when Clinton was president. And they're like, they go in and they're like, what do you mean it expired? Yeah, dude, the $20 you spent like a billion years ago, it doesn't last forever. So, I mean, it costs money to run. I go, obviously, you either got the value out of it, but it's like, some dude spent like $14 like 15 years ago, and he's like, hey man, like, dude, you know what I mean? It's like, even if you buy a movie on Prime, you still have to pay your Prime membership. It's not like you're getting that for free. It's in there. When you give up your Prime membership, it goes away, because we need, you've got to stay active and moving, because these things are, people think it's free, but it's very expensive to run a membership site and do all the content and things like that. So we try to keep it as really affordable as possible.
I was gonna say, people don't realize even just to maintain the name and the database is costing money.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So anyway, so we're going to talk about what's going on in Mexico, and in the background, I'm going to share just a little montage of what's happening. All right. Yep. So. Yep. So yeah. So anyway, so if anybody who's been under a rock doesn't know, El Mencho was clipped by the Mexican government, backed by the U.S.
Yep.
And if you remember back in the beginning of time when Trump first took office, he was viewing the cartels as terrorists.
Yep.
So that, he wasn't kidding. And when we do that, it puts them in a combatant position. So we don't treat them now like they're somebody else's problem. They're our problem. So Josh, if you would, if we're shifting from what happens, I just want to say, like, I guess I don't think it's legally, but policy wise, when somebody shifts from like looking at someone like organized crime in another country to a terroristic threat.
I mean, there's a few levels on that, right? So it's not just quote unquote organized crime, right? And that'd be like saying, 9th Street gang in, Los Angeles that, granted, not that they probably fall under like bigger umbrellas, but, let's say 9th Street gang, they literally control one street. That'd be like
I'm thinking more of like the cartels are like
no. I'm getting there.
Okay, sorry. Okay, go.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Right. So like generally, what you said would be like the UK being like 9th Street gang in Los Angeles is a terrorist organization. We're going to do something about it. That's absurd, right?
Right.
But when you look at the level of the cartels, right, you're talking about an international organization that is directly affecting your country, right?
And I would say probably a Fortune 50, Fortune 25 company.
Or bigger.
Or bigger, yeah.
Right. Because, I mean, their stuff is all illegal, right? So we don't know, like their assets are all quote unquote, private. So we don't know how much they actually have.
Right.
But you're billions for sure.
Yeah. And the one thing that they're not just gangbangers. I mean, they're either former cops, former military, highly trained.
Right. Yeah.
So very well equipped.
Yeah. So like that was a big problem in the early 2000s and the late 90s, early 2000s in the U.S. military is that all the big gangs were sending their people to the military, and they were letting them get all trained up, and then bringing them back to then come back and train up their people. And so the military as a whole did a really big crackdown on that. And if you had any tattoos, anything, any relations, even remotely to some sort of a organized crime, you were done. You couldn't go in.
But they also do a decent job of paying guys who already have gone through.
For sure. Yeah. No. I'm not saying that. Like, it's funny. Especially when I was in the military and stuff. People would be like, "Hey, if I become a contractor, quote unquote mercenary, or if I become a contractor and you see me on the battlefield, like, what would you do?" I'm like, "I'd shoot you in the face."
Right.
And they'd be like, "What? But we're buddies." And I'm like, "In that instance, we're not."
Right. It depends on what the situation is. Are you
and they're like, "Well, I wouldn't take a job that would go against American interests." And I'm like, if you're a gun for hire, you're going to take the job that pays the most.
Right. And you really don't understand a lot of times to pick the policy about what you're doing. You have a general idea though. If like, okay, we're going down to Nicaragua, and you're like, oh, okay, and we're protecting this, this airfield, you're like,
I mean, for sure. And especially with the war on terror and everything, most of these contract companies were in support of U.S. interests, right? That was they were being contracted to do things that the U.S. government couldn't do on their own because of, the rules of land warfare and everything else. And so they're like, hey, you guys go do it. It's deniability. Like, who cares if you guys get killed or whatever happens, right? You know? So generally speaking, but that can also turn, right? Like one day you're supporting the U.S. and the next day somebody else buys your owner of the company. They say, hey, we'll pay you this much to do this one operation against this team over here. You know what I mean? And you're just like, all right, And a lot
of times, I mean, I would imagine like you're not even, I wouldn't even, guys would be briefed. It's like, there's an enemy threat here. You don't know what it is.
They may or may not tell you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you just be like, okay, we have
So-
to take this power plant. Or
Yeah.
field
So,
or
so to be like, well, I'm not going to train cartel people. It's like, well, you don't know who you're training. They're just gonna be like, hey, you're going to train these 5 dudes. You're going to train those 5 dudes, and you have no idea who they are.
yeah, right.
So yeah, I mean, it definitely happens. But yeah, so back to your point, like they're well funded, they're well organized, they're generally well trained. So yeah, at that point, and they're like I said, they're now affecting a nation, right? So from Trump's perspective, U.S. perspective, they're flooding our borders with all these drugs, human trafficking, all these things, like stuff that's affecting our nation. They're encouraging their umbrella groups that they control on the streets to be violent and all these other things. And it's like, yeah, those are terrorist actions, right? That's one thing I've always said ever since I was a teenager, living amongst all these gangs, was like, gangs are no better than any other terrorist, right? They rule through terror. That's a terrorist, right? And I was always confused by like, yeah, I get like, go fight these, Islamic, jihadists, terrorists, whatever, in another country. But like, what about fighting terrorism in our own country? What about fighting?
Yeah.
You're supposed to be fighting terrorism abroad, but are we really doing that?
Right.
And it feels like Trump is finally like, nah, we're done. Like we're going to do something about it.
And it's, all the money that's flowing through, getting through the gangs with the drugs. I mean, that's just an extension of terrorism, because that's what's funding everything. And
right, exactly.
If you think about like, La Cosa Nostra, organized crime, in the, up in, from the, early 1900s up until the 90s, where, all of these, like they had their tentacles in like politics and business and everything like that. Now, cartels are like that, in my opinion, to like 11. It's like cranked up because there's so much money. And, now they're just blatantly out there. Like I'm seeing these are federales, but to be honest, I see cartel guys dressed looking just like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you can't, and when the option is, especially the cartels who are super ruthless, the option is, hey, take this bribe or I kill your family. Which one do you want?
Yeah, there's a guy who's been on road a couple times, Eddie Calderon, is a former federale. Now he's a U.S. citizen, and he's talking about it. He's like, look, he goes, they like threaten your family. He's like, you can't, like, if you're on it, he goes, it's tough to be an honest cop. He goes, that's why I'm here. He's like, he's like, when they were doing the elections in Mexico last time, he goes, oh, you hear about all these like 30 something, again, I'm probably wrong on this, but it was an outrageous number, like 30 something politicians were executed. But he goes, it sounds awful, but all of them were criminals, like they're all in that life. So, you're looking at a country that is just, run by, criminals, and criminals who are, people don't understand how ruthless, these dudes are. I mean, they're like strapping you up, cutting your chest open, pulling your heart out, crap. They've grown up.
I mean, people don't realize this, but like, they a lot of the big like heads and stuff like that, they call themselves the 12 disciples of Satan,
Yeah, right.
Like they're straight evil people and they love it.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah,
and
it's crazy.
And that's why, you're and they use that and they leverage that as fear, because why? It's a Catholic loving society.
Yeah. So,
okay, I'm the devil, screw you. And, you should fear me because God's not here, kind of shit. And, you grow like people, we always project, right? So people grow up and, it's like, yeah, okay, I got in some fights as a kid or stuff like that, or, I had a tough neighborhood, something like that. You have no clue what it's like growing up where like there's just like legit, like not just violence in your family, but people getting slaughtered, people going missing, people being trafficked. Because obviously we're not talking about, we haven't touched on that, but besides the drugs, all the sex trafficking, which seems to be
just slave labor in general, not just
talking about organs.
Right. Right. I mean, you're going down. So it's like, we've got, now it's like, look, it's like, it is a war zone, as you're seeing here. I mean, it is no joke. I mean, and it's like, if it's all out war, the only reason why the Mexican government or portions of the government, I would say, are fighting back is because it's U.S. backed. You know, they're not doing it without it. You had the president of Mexico. She was on and she was saying that, you know, and I'm paraphrasing, it's like, you know, we don't need the U.S. here. You know, we're fine. It's like, you know, don't engage with the cartels. You know, like kind of like it was like everything was peaceful until this shit happened. But it's not. Your country is not good. I know. Why do I know this? Because people are leaving.
Yeah.
It's very simple. No one wants to leave their country. And that's the
Yeah.
other thing that people seem to kind of like just gloss over and accept. Like, oh, they're coming over because their countries are so bad. Why are their countries so bad? Why do you think they want to leave their family, their culture? They're like, I'm sure everyone coming over like loves their country. Why do I know this? Well, because every time there's an anti-immigration protest, they're not waving the American flag, they're waving their goddamn flag from their country.
Yep.
You know, so what is that saying? Go back to that country. Well, you can't. Well, what are we going to do about it? Now, do I want to get involved? Hell no. I don't want to get involved in anything. I know. But, you know, this is a country that borders us. This is a big deal. Oh, no way.
And, you know, and it has such global ramifications.
Dude, hold on, wait, look at Damian post at the hospital waiting for news, grandbaby wailing. Let's go. Tim Marshall. Awesome, man. Congratulations. That's badass. And yes, dude, you are awesome. So yeah, I just, you know, you're looking at this stuff and you know, you're like, oh, you know, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, well, we shouldn't have poked the bear, right? All right. You know what? Let it go on. Let people, you know, continue to, you know, be forced out of their homeland. Let the drugs continue to come in. I don't know what the answer is to this, but what's been happening isn't working.
Yeah. So I will say, I know President Fox, I don't know how long ago he was their Mexican president.
Yeah.
But he was there for a while. But President Fox worked really hard to try and combat the cartels. He instituted a lot of different initiatives. He, you know, he actually like took the fight to them, you know, as much as he could, really.
Yeah.
But again, he was just like so hamstrung by all the corruption and everything. I know I have a guy I know who went and did some work for them, for the Mexican government. And, you know, he was put on this task force with like a bunch of dudes and he met them. They're all face covered, complete, like head to toe covered. And it was like no names were shared. And it was like, it was like basically, you know, like their, you know, CAG or, you know, SEAL Team 6 or whatever.
Right.
And it was like, this is a special task force to handpick people that are truly dedicated to Mexico. And, you know, they're incorruptible basically. And they went and they did some stuff and they ended up hurting the cartel pretty good. But it was like, you know, that was like his force, right? He had like 12 dudes, you know?
Right.
And it's like, these are the 12 people I can trust, you know? That's like, you know, he's like there with President Fox. And it's like, these are the 12 people I can trust. And you coming from America to help us with this.
Yeah. Well, that's it. You coming from
and that's it. Right. And that's it. Right.
Because once you start putting like people together, you know, someone's going to break, someone's going to be bought, someone's going to flip, I mean, you just, to get any, you know, numbers together, I'm like, you just can't.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I got to
the corruption's everywhere.
You can't handpick everybody.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same problems we had in, you know, Iraq and Afghanistan, where it's like, you know, you have the ANA there and, you know, they're there helping you, and then they go home and tell all their, you know, jihadist buddies about everything that went on that day. And next thing you know, you're rolling down the street and boom, there's some IEDs. And it's like, how did those get there? You know, and it's just like they're playing both sides, you know?
Of course.
And you have the same thing. Yeah. And you have the same thing happening, obviously, with the cartels where they're playing both sides, you know?
Because, you know that eventually this is going to get over. Somebody's going to get, you know, not elected. It's going to pass. It's going to pass.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what they have to do. And that's what they're planning on here. So this is why, you know, now from that perspective, this is why things have to be kind of like swift and brutal, because, you know, you can't do anything prolonged. You know, we got like 2 years of this shit. You know, he's got another 2 years, let's say. And then whoever else comes in, are we going to keep it up? That's why you know, when the whole shit with Venezuela, you know, the gas company's like, oh yeah, sure. You know, we go down there. I go, and then what happens in 2 years?
Yeah.
Yeah,
in a big part of it, like you said, so they're like, hey, we're going to take the fight to the cartel, and you have this that we're watching for the next 2 years because it's going to be a war.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about right before the podcast started, it's a civil war, right?
Yeah.
And so now you have this for a couple of years, and then how quick does the population get tired of it? And they're like, it wasn't really that bad while the cartel was running around. Sure, it wasn't great, but at least life was quote unquote normal,
Right.
And so it's like, do we really care? Let's elect somebody else who's not going to continue this,
because it's always going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
And you just don't know how long worse lasts. Unless you really seriously cut off their funding and then just start clipping people.
Yeah.
And that's really, it's going to be, that's a thing, damn.
And it's going to be interesting to see how it affects the whole, Mexican economy being such a fucking tourist hotspot there. And correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't they like 4 months out from hosting the World Cup there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And they're also like, they're like 2 weeks out from spring break.
Yeah.
1 week out from spring break. And I know people that are like, have kids that have gone down there. There's the airport.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, that's a lot of this stuff is concentrated on the West Coast for now. And that's what we were talking about before, about a civil war. It's not like even the American Civil War, it's not like everybody was fighting. There was pockets of fighting.
Oh yeah. People in the American Civil War, people would go, like the communities would go out and watch the battlefield and like have a picnic.
Yeah. Right.
And then eventually they get so disgusted by blood and carnage that they'd go home. But like generally speaking, everyday life continued except for the soldiers.
Yeah. And that's what, someone else was talking about, when Egypt flipped, the guy's like, yeah, I'm like, I don't know. I still went and got my paper and my coffee and went to work and everything was kind of normal, for him. Yeah. He wasn't fighting on the front line. There are areas, there are pockets that are fighting. And, obviously you don't know where exactly it's going to break out, but, what they're going to do to leverage it. Because again, the more desperate let's put it this way, the more desperate, the cartels get, the more violent they're going to become.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Now I'm like, okay, screw you. Where are U.S. tourists? Where are U.S. kids? Let's go. Yeah. And you're talking about like, I heard somebody, the resorts have security. I'm like, they got like a couple dudes in beige shirts with automatic weapons.
Yeah.
And I go, and they're going to leave the first time. They're not going to sit there and die for your kid because they're getting paid $10 an hour. $5.
Oh yeah, if the cartel wants in, the fucking cartel's going in.
Yeah, it's like
they're just gonna walk up. They're just gonna walk up and be like, "Here's $1,000,000," and the guy will be like, "Here's the key."
Right, or just get the fuck out of here. Give me the kid.
Yeah,
exactly. And they're there to stop someone who's like trying to braid your hair too much or sell you chiclets. They're not there to freaking protect you from. They'll stop somebody. They'll stop like college kids from fighting. Or one raping another, once it's among them. But, when it comes down to if their life is on the line, it's like you think that dude that security guard down at Stoneman Douglas ran out of there fast. I don't know if you remember that. These guys will be gone like, prom dress. I don't know.
I mean, could you imagine though? Could you imagine what the tourists there must be fucking feeling though? Like,
I know a guy right now who is sheltering in place in Puerto Vallarta.
Oh
yeah, I was gonna say there's an article of a guy at Puerto Vallarta right now, and he was talking about how like he's just there, and they're like watching the stuff going on around him, and they're like, well, I guess we're here.
Yeah, can't get a flight out. I mean, it's gonna and it's indefinite. This shit is not, it's going to be over when it's over. But yeah, now it's like here, handling Mexico a little differently because of the, the drug cartels and the violence that they have, they have in place. I mean, look, apparently, Venezuela's like, we didn't change anybody. We just stole their president. But, here it's like, this is like all out, cartels are like, that's it. We're just, we're taking over. Obviously, you kill one of the heads. Now you've got, of course, you got a power vacuum. So, that's going to add to it.
Yeah, and what they don't know is if there's an appointed successor, if that appointed successor can do the job, or if everybody's just, you know, the bunch of the lieutenants commanders are just going to be like, well, hey, now I control this section, you know, and now they're all fighting amongst each other, like,
which works to their advantage, the government's advantage, to take, you know, as they're fighting each other.
They're like a 10 front, you know, a 10-sided front instead of just a one-sided front, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, but again, this is like, you know, you're looking at, you know, footage from, you know, what's been going on there for the last few days. And yeah, I mean, so let's say, you know, this is what we talked about, preparedness. This is what we talked about the other week about, you know, trying to get home. You know, you're in, you know, let's say you're not even on, let's get to you're on vacation down there, because you're kind of, you know, Josh, is what you're talking about before, you know, roads blocked, can't get home. You want to get back to shelter in place, which is probably your best bet with what's going on here, considering what they're doing to all the infrastructure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're probably going to be safer with, you know, all the people that are also at the resort with you versus trying to like go your own. And I don't know what you would try to do by yourself, but
yeah.
So you guys would probably know better.
You're not going to walk.
You guys would probably know better. I don't know Mexico well. What's the, like, where all this shit's happening? What's the proximity to the U.S.? Like, is this something that could spill?
Close. It's close. So if you look at the map, I saw one that actually showed the map of all the affected areas, and it's like right at the tip of, or right where Baja meets California, and then it kind of swoops down and across and then back up. And there's like the section that's basically under Texas is like nothing.
Yeah, so you're looking at, here, I'll share this. You guys see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you can't. All right. So yeah, there's Puerto Vallarta. And you're looking at like, they're like, I think Cabo San, like up here, there's nothing. You know, Sinaloa, well, we heard of them. And Baja, there's nothing on this peninsula as of yet. But, you know.
Yeah, so they said that because based on its control, they said all these states that were affected. And while most of it is in one or two places, like the majority of it, they have seen stuff in Michoacan, Puerto Vallarta, Jalisco, obviously, Guanajuato, and it kind of swoops. I know you guys can't see my hand, but it swoops from Puerto Vallarta basically down and east through Mexico City to the other side. And then there's that one spot on Baja, which is North Baja.
That's all the way up here.
Yeah, North Baja, but not Southern Baja, just North Baja. And then, but everything that's like Sonora, Chihuahua, Coahuila, all those areas, Durango, like pretty much down to Durango and up is like there's nothing really going on.
Yeah.
So, like I said, basically everything that's by Texas, there's nothing happening.
So now, being that there was U.S. backing, though, are the cartels actually holding U.S.?
We need to define U.S. backing, because it wasn't U.S. backing; they shared intelligence.
Right.
Okay, so let's reword it then. Because of U.S. involvement, because there's a level of involvement through this. Are the cartels actually holding the U.S. to some level of responsibility? Could it spill to the U.S.?
It could obviously spill to, but they're, as of right now, they're not. And I think part of that is actually what happened in Venezuela. You know, like they're like, we don't want to get the U.S. actually involved because it's going to be swift and horrible.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And so they haven't yet. They haven't made any statements. They haven't said anything. You know, like we were talking about. You know, a lot of it's a power vacuum right now. They're trying to figure out what the heck is even going on amongst themselves, while also striking and retaliating against the Mexican government. Now, a lot of the destruction, actually, if you look at the destruction and you read a lot of the news reports that have come out and interviews by people and stuff like that, they thankfully have not targeted civilians that much, right? It's mostly been against the National Guard forces,
right,
and law enforcement and stuff like that. And for whatever reason, they love to target the public transportation system. And so that's why all the buses are burned out. So,
yeah, I mean, I see that for, you know, just disrupting like way of life for people.
Yeah, the way of life.
That's why. That's why also they're they're blocking the roadways and shit like that. So it's kind of like with protesters.
Exactly,
right?
But generally speaking, the people themselves have been left alone. So, and I think part of that is like, let's be real, right? Any good government organization, which you can call the cartels a government organization.
They're very well organized. They're very well run.
They know, right? Every good government knows that you have to keep the population subdued one way or another, because if you don't and they start turning on you, you can't fight out everybody.
Right.
And so
even from an intel standpoint, where they're just like, oh, they're over there.
Exactly. That's my point. Is like, you start pissing off all the locals, you start talking to all those people. You're not going to get any more extortion money. You're not going to have anybody else to bully. You're not going to have anybody else to like funnel into your group, right? And they're all going to turn on you, which you don't want that either, And so I think that's part of why they haven't really, not to say that civilians haven't been caught in the crossfire or anything, but generally speaking, they've left civilians alone. So,
I mean, the last I read, there was like 75 dead. 23 of them were government, National Guard type people.
I read more than that. So I read that out of like 60 people ish, like 50 of them were government.
Okay.
So,
all right. Yeah. So, where is this going? How does this end?
I think it probably ends with the cartel fracturing, people consolidating their own small power, and then cooling off because they can only sustain the heat for so long. Yes, they have funding. Yes, they have resources, but the government also has funding and resources. And, we say, U.S. backed, they gave intelligence, but I wouldn't doubt that if they're like, hey, we've got them on the run, that Trump's not like, here you go.
Here you go. Yeah, just send some,
like here's some weapons, here's some ammo, here's some money. You know what I mean? Like, keep it going, keep the pressure on. I think eventually, give it a month or two, they'll probably calm down. The other thing too is the World Cup, right? Like, Mexico is, obviously a pretty proud nation. They're also they love football, and so they're going to not want to deter the World Cup from not happening there.
Yeah, but
I think because that's one way to piss off the people, right? If you make it so dangerous that the World Cup cancels the World Cup or says we can't hold it in Mexico, we got to hold it someplace else. How happy are the people going to be?
Yeah. I just, I see.
So I think they'll go back to the quote unquote status quo. I think the cartel as a whole, it'll be like kind of fractured. It won't be quite as strong for a few years. And it'll come back up. Somebody will combine them again. And then
why clip this guy? Why clip El Mencho? I think it's a government that is just like, I don't know. There's kind of like all right, time to clean house feel to this.
I hope that's the case.
I mean, that would be best case scenario. I mean, now now we're into it. Now it's just it's basically attrition. It's like
I want to see the U.S. do that so bad. Oh my gosh, that's been my dream ever since I was like 12.
I think I was reading earlier too.
What Josh was talking about his dream as a child.
I was gonna say my dream ever since I was like 12 is I just want to see the U.S. like roll through the streets like like it was Baghdad and just literally murk every terrorist, gang member and just see you later. We're done.
I mean, and when and if that happens, it's over.
Well, I think I was reading.
Tim's on my side. See, Tim's on my side.
Yeah, they do. Right, Tim. Of course they do. They're making a shit ton of money, right?
Yeah. So that's my point. Is they're gonna have to cool off because they're not gonna not allow the World Cup to be there. Because if they did that, that would be not only would they lose out on a ton of money, but then the population of Mexico is gonna be pissed.
Yeah. So George, what were you saying?
Yeah, I think I was reading a bit earlier too about wasn't this dude like half on his fucking deathbed as well? I think there was some significant issues with him anyways.
Oh, what do you mean, like health wise?
Yeah,
I didn't hear that.
I was reading about there was something about it where he was, and I wish I had pulled it up, but yeah, he was already worse for wear.
I was listening to a conversation with him with I guess it was a commanding officer. It sounded like, where he's like, "What the f are you guys doing? I pale you guys, back off, f, And the cop was like, "Yes, sir. No, sir. Right away, sir." Like, the cop knew who he was talking to, and it didn't sound like he was like,
I mean, they caught him. They caught him on his way to go have fun with his girlfriend. Like,
right.
I mean, he's not that much on a deathbed if he's like traveling to go.
No, I don't think. I think his health was fine. Is what I was saying.
Yeah,
but I think it's exactly what it was. There's something that was fucking going on. So,
again, getting back to my talk with my son when he was in middle school, when I said, "Never trust your penis," because that's what happened. Like, his penis got him in trouble, got him killed.
Watch out for the honeypots.
Right, exactly. Like, that's what it is.
It was kidney disease. He was being treated for kidney disease.
Okay, but what does that mean? Like, he takes a couple pills.
Yeah, it's on dialysis.
On that, so.
Yeah, it's probably not on dialysis, like stage 4 kidney failure,
So from what I understand too, he was like a former cop. He had been arrested in the U.S. before and detained and then sent back for what, I don't know the details of it. Could have been for anything, right? So in the time, we probably couldn't hold him anyway. Dude was had the area locked down, and now there's like there's multiple other cartels, and besides what Josh said before, lieutenants and underbosses that are all vying for this. Right now they're fighting, but eventually it's like when the structure's fractured and you don't have a direct chain of command and a direct successor. Because in the military, okay, a general dies or retires, who's taking the spot, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty fairly organized.
Yeah, you have a chain of command that it just trickles down.
Right. So here it just kind of breaks at a certain level, which is probably a level underneath, and that's what maybe they're trying to take advantage of. Now,
one of the articles I was reading was talking about how he's like supposedly he had like a very dynamic personality that kind of kept everything together. And they're like, but now obviously in an organization like that, but now without him there, right now it's like they're kind of like, okay, now there's nobody looking out over all of us. Now what, right?
Right, exactly.
To say that like every lieutenant, or commander or whatever their strength structure is, that they all get along is also insane, right? Right. Like, hey, now it's time. I can stab that dude in the back who, messed up my cousin's brother, like.
First off, even in the best of corporations, everybody fucking hates each other. It's like, that's just human nature, right? Now,
and then you take these guys that like literally they all want to be like the top dog alphas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and they're all just mean,
stone cold killers, man.
That's what I'm saying. They're all just mean, evil people. Like, of course, they're gonna look at that dude and be like, "Man, I've hated you since day one. It's game on."
And they're looking for any opportunity. They don't even shoot; they just an opportunity.
Yeah,
that they can kill them and not be dead in the next 10 minutes.
Exactly. It's I'm sure that's a lot of that's going on. Not only are they fighting the the National Guard, but they're also like fighting each other. Like we were saying, they're fighting each other to also be like, all right, who's going to be the next top dog?
Yeah. So. And that's where exactly, and that's why you're I think it's an opportunity to kind of start blowing these dudes up and expose them for what they are.
It certainly can be, for sure. Yeah.
You got these guys who are just flat out animals that are smart and cunning. And again, when I say that, I don't say it in a way that these people are unintelligent, because they're extremely intelligent, probably even more so than the guys they're fighting, because they've had to survive under insane circumstances where the wrong word, the wrong action get you fucking disappeared. So these people who are at the top are like Mensa level dudes, and pair that with the will and the ability to do anything they want, to get whatever they want. And it's a dangerous person. And now obviously they have the resources to do it. The only thing they don't have, they can have the training. They don't have, they have manpower, but not as much manpower as, let's say, the U.S.
Yeah, so I mean, they operate in like a cells, right? They operate in cells.
Right.
They can't just put 3,000 troops on the street and march them down the street. You know what I mean?
Right.
They have to activate their little cells here and 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 have them pop off and do their different things. And so when you when you face a bigger combined force, yeah, you can harass them, but in the end, what's left, and so it's harder to they're facing the National Guard, which is a different organized response, right? And so
right.
Yeah, they're probably going to break down into an insurgency phase, which is kind of what they've always been at,
right?
But like you're saying, now they're vulnerable, and that can actually they can do some damage,
Yeah, and I know it's Mexico not wanting our involvement tactically, and it's again with your point, like you're saying before, Josh. I think I think Trump's going to kind of wait and see kind of shit. And if intel comes back where it's hey, these dudes are they're getting their asses kicked, I think something's going to change. Because the other problem that we have to consider is if this does go to all out war, full out Ukraine war, we're going to have also a refugee problem too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's now we've got, border camps and shit like that, which is a reality of what's going to happen. But, I'm not seeing that yet based on what we're looking at and what we're hearing. I don't think the difference is, though, they don't have cartels aren't necessarily calling in airstrikes.
Right. They have a lot of funding. They have a lot of resources, but their resources are still kind of limited.
Yeah, it's all they
don't have fighter jets, they don't have tanks, but they've got but they probably have anti armor and missiles or rockets and things like that.
Yeah, they got RPGs, they got all that crap.
Yeah, for sure.
So
but, it's still limited in comparison. If
right.
if it escalates to quote unquote war level and they're controlling airspace and using drones and which the El Mencho was known to start using drones and laying mines and stuff, right? So he's actually militarizing pretty well.
Sure.
But in
they
comparison,
they're not and that's the difference. And that's why, the refugee thing, it's you get refugee shit when your house blows up.
Yeah.
You get refugee shit when your whole town gets decimated and you're all right, now where do we go? Just keep walking north, dude. That's it. So yeah, I don't think, I don't think it'll come to that point. I mean, the only ones who are going to be blowing stuff up are the Mexican government or us.
Yeah, and it's not like Mexico hasn't gone through this before. I mean, it happens at least once every decade.
Yeah,
you know. So it's not like the Mexican people haven't seen it. It happened in the 80s, happened in the 90s, happened in the early 2000s.
Yeah. But there's got to be, when again, there's a cycle. But then, when does it end? When do people, I mean, you've got a government.
Well, we could say the same thing about the U.S. though, or any country. When does it end, right? When are we finally going to be I'm sick and tired of 9th Street Gang. I'm sick and tired of the Bloods and the Crips and everybody else. I'm sick and tired of MS-13. You know what I mean? And when are we, the people, going to be I'm sick and tired,
Yeah.
But it's easier, and we know this because, not everyone wants to learn how to defend themselves and take charge of their lives. It's easier to just say, you know what? I don't care that my neighbor down the road is selling drugs because it's easier not to care.
Oh, nice. Congratulations, Tim. That's awesome.
So, until the people finally get sick and tired and decide to do something about it, it's just going to keep going.
Yeah.
It'll keep cycling in waves,
Yeah. Right. And, you wonder, because you stop, you look at this stuff and you're looking at I look at neighborhoods, around here where you look at towns like Camden and Patterson and, these towns that go to crap. And it's why aren't they fixed? Why are the same shit we're looking at? If you look at crime reports from like the 70s and 80s, they're the same from like 3 weeks ago. You know, in the same neighborhood. And you're like, how is this going on? Why are, I mean, look, I mean, honestly, what works is law enforcement presence, and enforcing the freaking laws.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happened with New York City, and now, you know, whatever.
Well, and, you know, and the broken window theory too, right? You know, if everybody
Correct.
starts taking ownership and responsibility for their personal stuff and then their neighborhood and then their, you know, and it grows into the community, then people just naturally stop putting up with it, you know?
Right. Exactly. And that's what it has to, but I think, you know, the problem is what we're looking at.
Yeah.
You know, in certain instances, because it's got to get messy. You know what I mean? Cops got to make arrests, right? Shit, you know, people got to get put in jail. You know, mistakes are going to be made.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Well, I mean, let's compare it to what's happening in Minnesota right now.
Right. Yeah. Tim writes,
You know?
it happens when you vote the same people in place over and over. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. You know, same vote, same result.
Yeah.
You know, but then,
you know,
there are very wealthy, you know, liberal democratic towns. But again, these are people that are like not in my backyard. You know, it's, you know, they're very much like, oh no, can't do that. You can do that over there. Kind of shit. It's cool in that town and I'll support them. But oh no, not in my town. And there's something to that, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if, you know, it doesn't matter where, you know, you live. I'm like, the buy-in is the buy-in, right? And your qualification to get into these certain areas is the buy-in. And then getting back to your point, Josh, where it's like, how do we get people to give a shit about where they live? You know, where it's like, how do I give a shit, make somebody care that if there's litter on the street, or pick it up, or, you know, like clean up my dog shit, or like, you know, get a homeless guy to a shelter, fix that building, fix that window, clean up your stoop or your house and shit like that. It's like, now that's where the you know, the trick is. And
it comes down to, you know, a community. It comes down to being actually neighborly. Like, when was the last time, you know, like, it sounds like you talk to your neighbors pretty good, Damian, but I don't talk to my neighbors that much. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, gone are the days, you know, like the 40s, 50s, 60s and earlier, where it was like the neighborhood knew the neighborhood, you know, and the neighborhoods that are like that, where they know everybody and they talk to everybody, they all hang out together. Those are the safest neighborhoods. Yeah.
Right. Yep. I mean, that was us growing up too, you know. I mean, like now our houses are a little spaced apart, but it's like we happen to have like good neighbors on like two sides. But it's like, when I growing up, I mean, it's like we knew. I mean, I was getting in trouble from my buddy's parents.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, I mean, that was like what it was, and it's like you can't fuck around, and you respected what they said. You tried, but some point someone's gonna kick your ass.
Yeah.
You know, and that's
it starts at the family unit, right? You know, family is the lowest level of society. It starts at the family unit. If the family's strong, then the community becomes strong. You know, and what have we seen? Nothing but war on the family since the 70s. So which we know is by design, which we've talked about.
Yes, exactly. Because once that's destroyed, you know, that's it. I mean, and now you're looking at a country that has been, you know, ultra corrupted because there's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, man. You know, and a guy who's, you know, making, you know, $20,000 a year gets presented with $100,000 or more, and to look the other way.
Yeah, which is pocket change to these organizations.
Pocket change. They don't know what to do with it. So, you know, it's like, okay. And by the way, we're funding it. We're the freaking customer.
Yeah.
So, you know, holy crap. I mean, the money, like, if you like, I don't know if anybody, like, you want to like start, you know, just going down a rabbit hole, start watching, like, watch the first Cocaine Cowboys. And do you realize, like, a whole, in the 70s or the 80s, an entire police graduating class wound up either arrested in jail or dead. An entire graduating class of Miami PD.
Wow.
Every one of them. The whole place was built on cocaine and fraud. And, you know, the whole cigarette boat business, the speedboat business, that was just from drug running. And they had the one dude cigarette who was making them for the drug runners, and he was also making them for the cops. And each one was like, okay, cops were like, we need a faster boat. Drug runners were like, we need a faster boat. And all these things started popping up, and we're funding it. I mean, you couldn't even, like, there's money buried. There's millions upon millions of dollars like buried in people's yards, and no one knows, you know. It's just what to do with it.
Yeah.
You know, and we did this. We do this. You know, it's not coming from, you know, anywhere else.
If there's no market, it wouldn't be a thing, right?
Yeah, we are funding it. So, and that's, you know, that's what I'm like, you cut off, you know, what we're doing. And again, on our end too, it's too much money. I mean, what, you don't think, you know, borders are open for certain reasons?
Yeah.
You know, it's not an accident. But then when you look at what, the hundreds of thousands of people who die of fentanyl, and you want to sit there and talk to me about, you know, gun violence?
Yeah.
Holy shit, man. What are you doing? Like, let's look at this. You know, forget, you know, what we're doing to, you know, kids, you know, psychologically, and why all these, like, now, you know, these poor tortured souls are shooting these kids, you know, shooting up schools because what? That's normal. We're not talking about that. We're talking about banning guns, and meanwhile, you're not noticing a mental illness trend. You know, the fact that some of them now are trans, it's about mental illness, and
it's about mental illness.
That's what it is. I mean, if you're trans, I'm at that. It's about mental illness because nobody sane wants to kill scores of children.
Yeah,
that's just it. So, you know, how we're treating them, how we're medicating them. You know, can't we? You know, we're just ignoring this. You're sitting there telling me that, oh well, they didn't have a history. A history, you need a history to fucking kill somebody. You know, a history of mental illness. You don't need by doing it. You are. So,
I mean, even like legitimate psychopathic, like serial killers, you know, like it's usually like they have a trend. It usually starts with animals. Usually, you know what I mean? Like it builds up, right? There's a history if you know where to look.
Right. And oh, by the way, and they typically don't want to get caught. You know, and they're just like, you know, they'll hide and be shit. And apparently, I mean, they're obviously still operating.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know, you know, what, you know, why, you know, we haven't caught a serial killer. They're less. I mean, some people be like, well, you know, one is that I don't think they'll be moving to mass shooting because it's just too, you know, it's too obvious. You know, people are also saying
it's too visible.
Yeah. People are saying, they're like, well, we've got cell phones, we've got security cameras. I go, yeah, but no. I mean, dude, you wear a baseball hat and a hoodie. You know what I mean? You're no one's going to recognize you, even in like the best high-res security camera, you know, or phone. I'm like, you can, you know, especially, you know, people, you know, it's like, I'm sure, you know, sex workers are getting killed regularly still, but you don't really hear anything about it. I mean, these are people who are, you know, discreet and go unprotected to a lot of places. And that's how these guys mostly feed on, you know, and again, all the children that are missing. I mean, the shit that's going on with, you know, with, Epstein. I'm like, holy crap, dude. I don't even want to get into, you know, nobody's eating that much pizza. You know, I mean, nobody's like, you know, with beef jerky, pizza, grape soda. What are we talking about here? You know, yeah. So anyway, but again, all this stuff is like when you find out that the U.S. is like the biggest, you know, consumer of like, you know, child porn or you know, child sex trafficking. I don't know where they're getting their numbers from, but a lot of them are coming from through Mexico. You know, and you don't want to, you know, you don't think the cartels are involved with that on any level. I mean, they're going to make $1 for $1. They don't give a shit. And, you know, that's what these people, they don't treat people like they grew up hard, man. They grew up in
it's like I was reading this thing about I forget who it was, but it was like one of the old school mafia people, from like the 50s and 60s and stuff,
Yeah.
And they were interviewing him, and they're like, like, what do you think about modern organized crime or whatever? And he was like, it's insane. He's like, we would never do any of the things that they do. He was like, we had codes and we had like limitations, and like we'd never pass those things. He's like, never messed with children, you never messed with family. You know what I mean? And he was like, but now everything's game.
Yeah, it is. And that's where, you're looking at like these dudes, who, I mean, look, a lot of things that also happened, with organized crime while these guys started flipping is because of RICO. And like they started facing like stiffer sentences instead of like, it started now instead of going away for 5 years, you're going away for 25 years. And I was like, oh shit. And that's how these guys started flipping on each other. And yeah, I'm like, you've got, there was, with certain guys, especially the old school guys, there was a code where you just didn't, there's certain things you didn't do. And, a lot of them were very patriotic, believe it or not. They came to the country and they loved the country. It's a weird, dynamic about how much they loved America, but they were criminals and murderers. They viewed themselves as, you could justify whatever you want. They're viewing themselves as soldiers, but, people who got involved with them and things didn't go their way, either got, busted out, which means they, I think there was a one episode of The Sopranos where a guy had a sporting goods store, and it just happened to be Ram's Outdoor Store, which is right down the road from here. And he got in gambling debt. And to pay off the debt, they're like, hey, let's, let me, come in. I'll come in as a business partner and you pay off your debt. And it wasn't like he was going to come in and run the business and take a percentage of it. It was just basically there to turn them out. And they were running scams out there. They were buying inventory and then selling it cash out the back. They're, charging up his credit card. They made their, whatever, $200,000 back. They made that back like threefold. And then they, busted out the business. He went bankrupt, and that was it. So, you're not, it's not like they're like, again, like there's a part of them like, that does have like some code of ethics. But yeah, when these guys are like, I'm a stand-up guy, it's like, yeah, now you're a scumbag criminal too. So on that note, good podcast, guys. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Fellas, anything going on this weekend?
Not a thing this weekend.
No,
excellent.
Not this weekend.
Yeah, George, how much snow did you guys get?
Oh fuck! It hasn't stopped.
Yeah.
I would say, the East Coast is getting it really bad right now. Out front of my place, we're sitting at about piled up. I would say 4.5, 5 feet.
Oh, we're at about a foot, a little over. We didn't get it.
It's 70 degrees here.
Yeah, no,
sunny, blue skies.
Yeah, I got one kid in Charleston and one kid in California. They're like, yeah. Oh, we missed the snow. I'm like, yeah, no.
Yeah, no.
You missed the snow day. Snow day's awesome. Snow day with kids is the best thing ever. But yeah, no. So anyway, okay. On that note, everybody, I want to thank you for joining us. Until next time, train on.